Apple not 5 seconds ago just announced the brand new MacBook Pro 14. Now this is the computer that I've been waiting for since they initially announced their transition over to the Apple Silicon processors. So what is it and how does it potentially change the game? Let's find out. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. No kidding, I'm so excited about this. This is the one. This is the computer that I've been waiting for. So let's go through here, let's go through the ordering options, let's go through the specs. I've got a page of notes that I want to talk about, so let's hop right to it. So yes, Apple today announced two brand new MacBooks, the MacBook Pro 16 and the MacBook Pro 14. Now, I think the MacBook Pro 14 is the more exciting of the two. You know me, I like smaller, more compact tech, and it looks like an awful lot. So in this thing, we get the brand new M1 Pro or M1 Max processor. Now, if you, hold on, let me go to my notes so I don't misrepresent this thing. It looks crazy. Now, we already have an 8-core processor inside of the M1, but these are now 10-core processor, so you get 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores instead of the 4 and 4 that you currently get on the M1, which is, okay, let's go through this so I don't miss anything because there was an awful lot. You can see here, we're talking about the M1 Pro, the M1 Max. Naming convention, kind of wonky, but it is Apple, so they get to name their chips, I guess, right? We'll also get a liquid Retina XDR display, just like that gigantic expensive display they sell. Best cameras, best audio. So good. There's also some physical things that I'm really excited to talk about too. You can kind of see them right here. It looks like an SD card, more Thunderbolt, HDMI, and MagSafe. Is this my perfect laptop, team? Look at this. I mean, when Apple initially announced the M1, we were all very skeptical of their 2 times performance, 4 times battery life, blah, 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 blah. But now that they're saying 13 times faster graphics performance, almost 4 times better CPU performance, I believe that stuff. I'm really impressed with what they've done. So yeah, like I already mentioned, in these brand new versions, we will get SD card slots, Thunderbolt, HDMI. They'll get MagSafe, which supports faster charging, Thunderbolt, and you'll still get the headphone port. Like that's, I got to give Apple credit where I'm really excited that they're bringing back stuff that they took away previously. Very exciting stuff. You can see the 2 new processors that they have worked on. They're taking M1 and they're basically scaling it up. So you can see here the M1 Pro, which I hesitate to call the lower end because M1's now the lower end. The M1 Pro has up to a 10-core CPU, up to a 16-core GPU. That version can also go up to 32 gigabytes of unified memory, and they're saying here that it has a 200 gigabit per second memory bandwidth. That's really fast, and that's what unified memory gets you. The M1 Max, on the other hand, also has the 10-core CPU, but it has up to a 32-core GPU, 64 gigabytes of unified memory, and a 400 gigabit per second memory bandwidth. That's wild. Let's consider what I consider to be the fastest processor on a laptop right now. That's the Ryzen 5900HX. It doesn't do all this. And it's going to be in a productivity laptop. That stuff's crazy. Yep, we talked about how they're basically taking M1, scaling it up. Scary fast. This does seem like it's going to be scary fast stuff. One of the cool things, and we see it right here, is one of the big negatives about M1 is on any of the M1 Max except the M1 Mac Mini, because it has HDMI, it would only support 1 external display. Now the M1 Pro will support 2 external displays, and the M1 Max will support even more. Hopefully they'll talk about it here in a second. But it's wild stuff. Yep, we talked about that. ProRes, yes, it should be working very well with ProRes recording. I don't use ProRes, so it's not as exciting for me, but all of this stuff is pretty crazy. Okay, here we go. This is now the M1 Max, and it has support for up to 4 external displays. Thank goodness. Like, one of the biggest problems, like, we use these computers, or I use these computers as like my working from home setup, and if you are somebody that likes to have the wall-o monitors, you were kind of kept away from being able to do that with the M1 version. Now with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, you can. It's going to be so good. One of the options that was kind of taken away with the M1 Max is you only get the 1 processor option. Well, now, as we'll see when we go through the tech specs, you get multiple processor options. You can see how they talk about the M1 Max CPU, the M1 Pro CPU against it, which is GPU performance. And I think, again, it seems like the 16-inch is not going to be the more powerful one, and we'll make a separate video covering the 16-inch, but I want you to see these crazy, ludicrous numbers on the 14-inch. The 14-inch is now going to be like a proper level, basically a desktop computer, and they're comparing it against what it's replacing, which is the higher-end 13-inch MacBook Pro, which used to have an Intel i7 in it. And that Intel i7 cannot touch what the M1 can do, especially because it had Intel Iris graphics. It did not have a dedicated graphics card. Also with the battery life, now the battery life is not exactly as much as I was hoping for. You do get 20 hours of battery life in the M1 MacBook Pro 13, and now in the 14-inch model, you're going to get 17 hours of battery life. I mean, they've got to power that insanity somehow, right? And you are going to take a little bit of a hit in the battery life. But even my M1 MacBook Air, with its 18 hours of battery life, that's fantastic. So 17 hours while having that kind of power, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make all day. Now, the thing that I'm really nervous about, the thing that I have to hope that their designers were really able to figure out the thermal cooling system. The MacBook Air does not have a thermal system. The MacBook Pro 13 does, but the M1 MacBook Pro 13 is not trying to move the power or have the same kind of capabilities that these new MacBooks are going to have. So we really, like, all of this is hinging on this thermal performance. So I'm really hoping that because the M1s are so thermally efficient and power efficient, they don't generate nearly as much heat, combine that with a very beefy cooling system. Come on, this is the thing. That's the one thing that's going to ruin it for me. Another huge update to the MacBook Pro 14 is going to be the new Xdr display. So like we said in the opening, this will be a liquid retina panel, much like that very expensive Pro XDR display they sell, that $5,000 monitor? Well, it's now coming to the laptops. And what's also cool, much like we saw in the iPhone 13 Pro Max and the iPad Pros from recent memory, we're now going to get ProMotion inside of the MacBook Pro 14. And what that's really going to do, it's going to make gaming on here a whole lot better because there is actually use case scenarios and usability features that are better when you have a higher refresh rate when you're playing video games. But also, if you are somebody like me and just uses these for productivity tasks, you spend a lot of time reading emails, you spend a lot of time reading lots of boring stuff, it will slow the display down too to also save battery life. And that's, team, I'm telling you, battery life is the biggest thing for me, and being able to have a screen that will change itself to do more stuff when I want it to have a faster refresh rate, have smoother operation, and then have it slow down when I don't need that, that's incredible. That's I love it on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. I cannot wait to have it on my MacBook too. And one of the cool things that they showed in the demonstration was, if you are a video editor like me, I shoot all of these videos in 30 frames per second. Well, I don't necessarily want a fast refresh rate monitor to mess up with how the video looks to me as I'm trying to edit it. Well, on here, you can actually change it to set what you're trying to do. So that's very, very impressive stuff. And not to stop with the display, but the display itself is now built off mini LEDs, and it can go up to 1,000 nits of brightness. This MacBook Pro 13 can go up to 500 nits of brightness. Having the MacBook Pro 14 have 1,000 nits of brightness, you're going to be able to work on the top of a mountain, even if there's like glaciers and the snow's on there, and you got to wear your glacier glasses so you don't get like snow blind. You're going to be able to see this because it's going to be so bright. 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio, 1,000,000,000 colors. So good. And yes, one of the things that I think is going to be the most controversial take on the whole new MacBook is they did put a notch in here so that they could fit the 1080p camera. Now, I don't mind notches. Notches have never bothered me ever. If it's there, okay, whatever, we'll work around it. But what I do like is they did upgrade the camera to have a bigger sensor, wider angle, and it will be now 1080p instead of the 720p that MacBooks have had previously. And I think this is very, very important because cameras are no longer an ancillary benefit. People don't look at a camera and like, okay, hey, great, my laptop has it. Now that we've been working from home for almost 2 years, we do all of our collaboration via our computers. Cameras on laptops and computers in general are incredibly important. And to see that here, that's good. I like that they also included their studio quality mics. If you listen to the iMac video, if they get a similar kind of microphone system from the iMac, this will be incredible. Like, the microphones on the M1 iMac are crazy good. So very excited to see it. They also have a 6-speaker surround sound system that should make it sound incredible. We already talked about the ports a little bit, so I'm not going to delve into them again. MagSafe 3, Thunderbolt 4 headphone, SD card, Thunderbolt HDMI. The HDMI is what I'm most excited about because this is just going to plug right into my home office and I use HDMI for that. MagSafe 3, we talked about the displays. It looked like they were updating their keyboard a little bit as well. I'm very excited that they took off. Can you see this? I hate the Touch ID bar. So I'm very excited to see that the Touch ID bar is totally gone. I'm very excited for that. And I like this. Can you see this like matte black finish? Instead of a whole aluminum finish for the keyboard, they have a nice black background. I'm pretty excited to check that out. They talked about macOS monitoring and some of the updates to that. So we talked about all of the cool features of the brand new MacBook Pro 14. Let's go through the ordering options. Now, spoilers, I did already order my personal MacBook Pro 16 and MacBook Pro 14, but let's kind of walk you through what options you get and what I would recommend for different price points. Now, you can see here at the base model, it is $1999, which is, it seems, about $200 more expensive than the MacBook Pro 13 with the i7 used to be. But here, you'll get the 8-core CPU, the 14-core GPU, 16 gigabytes of unified memory, and a 512 gigabyte solid-state drive right out the bat. And I think that's pretty good. You will get a lower-end power adapter, 67 watts, as opposed to the 96 watts on the higher end, but that's still going to be more powerful than the M1 MacBook Pro 13, so I really like this. What kind of things can we do to this MacBook if we wanted to? You can go up to the, so many options here. You can go all the way up to the M1 Max with a 10-core CPU, 32-core GPU, 16-core neural engine. That will add $700. You can do up to 64 gigabytes of unified memory and up to an 8 terabyte solid-state drive for $6,000. Whoo, that's going to be like, you're going to be surprised. You're going to have a laptop that's like this size and it's going to be more powerful than some people's desktops. That's crazy. That's so awesome though. Okay, let's check out the higher end. I don't think there'd be anything too crazy from what we just saw different here. But you can see that this one comes with a 10-core CPU, the 16-core GPU, 16 gigabytes unified memory, 1 terabyte solid-state drive. It already comes with the faster power adapter. All right, so here you can go up to the M1 Max. We already kind of started out higher there. So, okay. Is there any big difference here? No. There's no difference. They just set the two different options at two different spec levels. There's not a physical difference between the two. So how would I spec this out if I were you looking to buy this laptop? I would probably say, if I were going to spec one of these out, honestly, I think the 8-core CPU is actually very incredible just by itself. What I would do is I would probably kick it up to the 10-core CPU and then the 32 gigabytes of unified memory. That's like the basis of what I would do. If you need more storage than 512 gigabytes, I don't because I have a big RAID system set up in my house. I would then say maybe go with 1 terabyte solid state drive. That will bring you to $27.99. It's very expensive. That is a very expensive laptop, team. You're not going to find laptops that cost this much almost anywhere else, but I think you are going to get a lot of capabilities in there. The only way I would say go higher than this is if you know you have specific processes, specific things that really need that extra unified memory. I don't. Honestly, I don't have anything that requires all of this additional GPU power or all of this additional unified memory power. So I'd probably say for somebody like me, you're trying to run a mid-level YouTube channel, this is the version that I would go with. But what about you? What are some of the things that you were most excited about from the event today? Let me know in the comments below. And what would you like to see from the M1 MacBook Pro 14 when it comes in? Really excited for it to come in. And tomorrow we'll do the version of this video for the M1 MacBook Pro 16. I cannot wait to do that. And if you like this video, well, I don't have anything else to show you. Tomorrow, check back for the M1 MacBook Pro 16 video so you can have even more fun with that one. Thanks for watching.